The phone rang at 2:14 a.m. A sound like that cuts through silence sharper than any knife. I reached for it, half asleep, the glow of the screen casting a pale light across the room. Unknown number. A woman's voice, flat and official, spoke. "Mr. Alcott, we're calling from First Union Bank. We've detected unusual activity. Today, a wire transfer of $12,000 left your account. Did you authorize this transaction?" I sat upright, my chest tightening. I hadn't sent a penny. My hands shook as I muttered, "No, that's a mistake. It wasn't me." There was a pause. Then the clerk asked something that made my blood run cold. "Have you recently given access to a family member?" That word, family, lodged in me like a splinter. I ended the call without answering, set the phone down, and stared into the dark. Because 2 weeks earlier, my grandson Daniel had given me a gift. It was the first Sunday in March when he came to my door, grinning the way he used to when he was 10, and begged me for help building a treehouse. Only now he was taller than me, his hair neatly combed, dressed sharp like a man who had somewhere important to be. He carried a wrapped box under his arm. "Grandpa," he said, and his voice was warm, too warm. "I've got something for you." I opened it right there in the hallway. Inside was a gold watch, heavy, gleaming, the kind you only saw on the wrists of bankers and politicians. My throat caught. Nobody had given me anything like that since my wife passed, and even then, she'd never wasted money on something so extravagant. "I don't deserve this," I whispered. Daniel grinned wider and squeezed my shoulder. "You deserve everything, Grandpa. More than you know." At the time, I thought he meant love. I thought it was gratitude. And maybe you would have thought the same. For the next 14 days, that watch never left my wrist. I wore it to the diner where the waitress knew my coffee order before I sat down, to the grocery store where the cashier asked about my hip, even while I dozed in my recliner at night. Every time I glanced at it, I felt lighter. Maybe I hadn't failed as a grandfather after all. Maybe I'd managed to raise a boy into a man who remembered where he came from. But after the call from the bank, I pulled the watch off with trembling hands. Under the lamplight, I turned it over, my thumb brushing the backplate. That's when I saw it, a faint seam I'd never noticed. With the edge of a pocket knife, I pried it open. Inside, hidden beneath the polished gold, was a chip, a tracker. My grandson hadn't given me a gift. He'd given me a weapon, aimed straight at me. I didn't call him. Not that night, not the next morning. I carried the watch in my pocket like a dead weight, cold against my thigh. My mind spun in circles, every memory of him cracking open with new meaning. The afternoons I taught him to fish. The Christmas mornings when he'd torn wrapping paper with the frenzy of a wild pup. All of it now carried a shadow. Had he smiled the same way then, practicing for this? That evening I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the silent phone. I thought about dialing Daniel, asking him straight. But something inside me, a voice I hadn't heard in years, told me to wait, to listen first. Because if there's one thing I've learned in a long life, it's this: when betrayal comes from blood, it doesn't come alone. The next day, I tested a small theory. I called my daughter, Daniel's mother. I asked about a book I'd supposedly left at her house, something meaningless. She laughed, told me she hadn't seen it, and tried to end the call. But the line didn't disconnect. By accident or fate, I don't know. And that's when I heard her voice in the background, hushed but sharp, cutting through the hum of her kitchen. "He doesn't even notice, Daniel. The old man's slipping. By summer, we'll have everything moved. The house, the accounts, clean." The words hit me harder than any fist. I gripped the receiver so tightly the plastic creaked. My own daughter, the girl I once walked down the aisle, the one who sobbed in my arms when her dog died, was plotting against me. With her son. I didn't speak, didn't slam the phone down. I just listened until their voices faded. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I sat in the living room with the lights off, staring at the old photographs on the mantel. My wife's smile frozen in time. My children's first Christmas. Daniel at 7, gap-toothed, eyes wide with joy. And I kept asking myself, how does love curdle into this? By dawn, I knew one thing. I couldn't play the fool. Not with my blood turning against me. But here's what I'll admit only now, to you. In that moment, I still hadn't decided whether I wanted justice or revenge. And the choice between those two is what would tear the month apart. I didn't confront Daniel right away. That would have been the mistake they expected, the old man blurting out his hurt, showing his cards too soon. No, I kept quiet, watched. listened. Because betrayal doesn't end where you catch it. Betrayal spreads, like water finding every crack in the floorboards. So I wore the mask they wanted to see. I smiled when Daniel came by, nodded when my daughter called. But in the silence of my own rooms, I began piecing together the truth. 2 nights after the bank's call, I drove across town. The streets were slick with rain, the kind that makes every streetlight smear into long golden streaks. I told myself I was just visiting, but the steering wheel knew better. My knuckles were white around it, and my chest ached with the weight of not knowing how deep this went. I parked across from my daughter's house, engine off, watching the windows glow with kitchen light. I sat there longer than I should have, just staring at the silhouette of the boy who used to spend summers at my place. He was taller now, voice deeper, but I could still see that 7-year-old who'd once called me his best friend. That memory stung worse than anything. Finally, I rang the bell, keeping my smile easy, casual. My daughter opened the door in a rush, flour on her shirt, as if she'd been baking. She kissed my cheek, ushered me inside, asked if I wanted tea. It was all so normal I almost believed it. But then, in the middle of her fussing, I pulled the oldest trick in the book. When she left the room, I pressed my phone under a dish towel on the counter, recording. Later that evening, I pretended to forget my coat. I stepped outside, waited half a block, then circled back quiet as a thief. Through the back door window, I saw them, my daughter and Daniel at the table. Her voice was sharp, nothing like the soft tones she'd used with me minutes before. You need to keep him steady, Daniel. Don't let him suspect. He signs over the house, the accounts move clean, and by summer, we're free. He's not even watching. Daniel nodded, eyes fixed on the table, his hands restless. What if he catches on? He won't, she snapped. He can barely keep his pill straight. Just keep smiling. I should have stormed in right then, but something pinned me to the ground. Not fear, not shock. It was grief. Standing there in the dark, rain dripping off the brim of my cap, I realized this wasn't just a con. This was the people I'd raised building their future out of my grave. I walked away without knocking. By the time I got home, the recording was still running on my phone. I played it back once. Then again. Each word landed heavier than the last. That night, I couldn't sit still. I moved through the house touching old things like I was saying goodbye. My wife's rocking chair, the oak desk I'd carved initials into as a younger man, the photo albums I rarely opened because they cut too deep. I caught myself whispering to her, my wife, like maybe she was listening somewhere above. Did we fail them? Or did they fail us? There was no answer. Just the hum of the fridge and the slow tick of that cursed watch, still hidden in my pocket. The next morning, I called my lawyer. I didn't tell him everything, not yet. Just asked a few questions about trusts, about what could and couldn't be touched if someone, let's say, got ambitious with another man's estate. He gave me the basics, and I took notes with a steady hand. Because by then I understood, they weren't waiting for me to die. They were planning to bury me while I was still breathing. That evening, Daniel stopped by again. He strolled into my kitchen like he owned the place, grabbing a soda from the fridge without asking. Same grin, same ease. Only now I could see the edges of it. A performance, a mask. Grandpa, he said between sips, you ever think about moving in with us? It'd be easier. No more groceries, no more fixing leaks. You'd be around family. The words should have sounded kind. Instead, they sounded like a trap. I leaned against the counter, watching him carefully. Easier for who? He froze for just a second, came halfway to his mouth. Then the smile came back, forced this time. Too quick. For you, of course. But the silence between us stretched heavy, and I could see sweat starting to glisten at his temple. I didn't push further. Not yet. Let him think I was still half asleep. Because now I knew the game. And the one thing they'd forgotten is that I taught Daniel how to play chess. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat at the table, spreading papers across the wood, mapping out everything I had, everything they thought they could take. For the first time in years, my mind felt sharp, clear, like the fog of grief had lifted. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to turn the board over. And I'll tell you something. Once you make that decision, once you decide you're not prey anymore, the world changes shape. By the time the sun came up, I knew exactly what I had to do. But here's where I made my first mistake. A mistake that nearly cost me everything. The following Sunday, Daniel came by again. Sundays had become his habit, as if routine would keep me from noticing the cracks. He knocked twice. then pushed the door open without waiting for me to answer. That was his way lately, like he already owned the place. He carried himself the same as always, shoulders back, smile quick, voice easy. "Grandpa," he said, "you really should think about letting us take care of you. It's not right you're rattling around here alone." He walked straight to the fridge, grabbed a soda, popped the tab. He didn't ask, didn't look at me. That detail stung. How he assumed my silence meant permission. I stayed at the table, my coffee cooling in front of me. I slid the watch across the wood until it stopped between us. Its gold surface caught the morning light like an accusation. "I know what you did, Daniel," I said quietly. The words landed harder than I expected. He froze, the kin halfway to his lips, eyes locked on the watch. For the first time in his life, he didn't have a quick answer. His smile drained away, and I saw something raw in him. Fear, maybe, or shame. Finally, he muttered, "It wasn't my idea." I didn't flinch. "I know." Because I did. The recording from my daughter's kitchen still echoed in my head. Her sharp voice cutting, his weaker one bending. He hadn't led this, but he'd followed. And sometimes following is worse. We sat in silence. He shifted in his chair, tapped the soda against the table, tried to steady himself. She thinks you can't handle things anymore. She says it's better for everyone if we manage it." "Manage it?" I asked, my voice flat. "Is that what you call it?" He looked down, shoulders hunching. The boy I remembered, the one who used to chase fireflies in my backyard, flickered through for just a moment. Then the man returned, defensive, cornered. "You don't understand how much pressure she puts on me. She says if I don't go along, she'll cut me out. She's my mom, Grandpa. What am I supposed to do?" I leaned forward, my hands steady on the table. "You're supposed to do what's right. That's what you're supposed to do." He didn't answer. He stared at the watch instead, its ticking suddenly loud in the quiet room. I could see him fighting himself, whether to keep lying or to admit everything. And in that pause, I realized something important. Daniel wasn't the mastermind, but he wasn't innocent either. I thought about the boy I'd raised summers, the boy who used to believe I hung the moon. And now here he was, letting his mother sharpen him into a weapon against me. "Do you know what that chip is for?" I asked. He nodded reluctantly. "To see where you go. To know if you meet with anyone. She wanted to be sure you weren't talking to lawyers, or—" He stopped, catching himself. But it was enough. I knew. I pushed the watch closer until it touched his hand. "Take it," I said. His eyes widened. "What?" "Take it back. Wear it. Let her think it's still working. Let her believe the old man is too blind to see what's right in front of him." He shook his head, confused. "Why?" I let the silence hang before I answered. "Because you're going to help me, Daniel. Whether you know it or not." For a moment, I thought he might bolt. His eyes darted to the door, to his phone, anywhere but me. But then he lowered his gaze, slipped the watch into his pocket, and whispered, "If she finds out." I cut him off. "She will. One way or another. The only question is whether you're standing with her or with me." When he left that afternoon, I stood at the window watching him cross the yard. His steps were slower, his shoulders hunched. He looked less like a victor and more like a pawn realizing the board had changed. But I'll tell you something I didn't admit then. Giving him that watch back was my gamble. Because I couldn't be sure which way he'd lean when the time came. And gambling on family, that's the most dangerous bet a man can make. That night, I sat down with pen and paper. I wrote out every account, every deed, every asset with my name on it. I mapped what could be moved, what could be shielded, what could be locked down beyond their reach. It felt like drawing a battle plan. And maybe it was. But in the quiet, another thought gnawed at me. Was I fighting to protect what was mine, or was I fighting because I wanted them to pay? The line between justice and revenge blurred a little more with every tick of the clock. By the end of that week, I'd made a choice. And it was the kind of choice you don't walk back from. By the start of the third week, I was moving faster than they ever imagined I could. They thought age slowed me down, that grief had dulled my edge. But betrayal has a way of waking a man. I called my lawyer first. Not the one my daughter knew. The one I hadn't spoken to in years. A man who owed me a favor from back when I covered his father's debts in the 70s. We met in a quiet office, blinds drawn, no records that would tip off anyone scanning my bank statements. I sold the house. Quietly. Signed the papers, transferred the deed. By the time the ink dried, the place I'd built my life in was no longer mine to give away. The proceeds went straight into a trust, so tight, it would take a team of wolves with crowbars to pry it open. And here's the part one enjoyed. I designed that trust with conditions. Not cruel, not impossible, just honest. If Daniel or his mother wanted a cent, they'd have to prove 5 years of clean living. No arrests, no debt collectors, no bankruptcy filings. 5 years of discipline before they touched a dollar. I figured it was the only way to test if there was any good left in them. A week later, the trap was ready. I knew they were coming, because betrayal runs on schedule once greed sets the clock. Sunday afternoon, right on time, Daniel's car pulled into the driveway, his mother in the passenger seat. They climbed out like they were walking into victory, talking, laughing, already planning the spoils. But there was a stranger's car in the driveway, and when Daniel jammed his key into the front door, it didn't fit. He tried again, harder, confused. His mother frowned, muttered something sharp, took the key herself. Still nothing. That's when the new owner stepped out, a man in work boots, holding a stack of mail. "Can I help you?" he asked. Daniel froze. My daughter's face drained of color. And taped to the door, fluttering slightly in the wind, was an envelope with their names written across it in my hand. Inside, just one note. "You forgot who taught you to play chess. The king isn't as weak as you thought. Dad." They tried calling me within minutes. The phone buzzed over and over, 40 times that night, maybe more. I didn't answer. I let the ringing echo through the house I now rented across town, smaller but safer. Each call was a reminder that I'd finally turned the game around. I pictured them pacing the driveway, Daniel cursing under his breath, my daughter shouting, blaming him, blaming me, blaming anyone but herself. Maybe she cried. I doubt it. She'd hardened long ago. But one thing was clear. For the first time, they weren't in control. That week was strange. Quiet. I walked streets where nobody knew my name, drank coffee in a diner without familiar faces, slept in a room that didn't hold my wife's scent. It should have felt like loss, but it didn't. It felt like breathing clean air for the first time in years. And yet, it also felt unfinished. Because I knew greed doesn't die easily. And blood ties, they don't snap, they fray. On Thursday, Daniel showed up. I hadn't told him where I was, but he found me anyway. He knocked softly, no bravado this time. When I opened the door, he didn't smile. He didn't even look me in the eye. He dropped to his knees, head in his hands, voice cracking. "Grandpa, I'm sorry. Mom pushed me into it. I didn't know how to say no. I didn't want to hurt you." For a moment, I saw the boy again. The boy who once sat on my shoulders to hang the star on the Christmas tree. The boy who called me his hero. And damn me, but I believed him. At least partly. I let him in. I cooked him dinner. We ate in silence. And when he cried into his plate, I didn't stop him. Afterward, I put my hand on his shoulder, the same way I did when he was a child. "You have a chance to change, Daniel," I said quietly. "Don't waste it." He nodded, eyes wet, face pale. For the first time in weeks, he looked like he carried the weight, not me. But here's the truth I kept hidden. I hadn't told him about the clause in the trust. He thought I'd shut the door completely. In reality, I'd left it open, just narrow enough for him to fight his way back through. If he could. When he left that night, he hugged me. And I let him. But as I stood at the door, watching him disappear into the dark, I couldn't shake the thought. Had I just given him a second chance, or given him the space to try again? By the next week, I'd have my answer. And it wouldn't be the one I wanted. They didn't stop calling. Even after Daniel came with tears in his eyes, even after I fed him and sent him home with leftovers, the phone lit up every night. My daughter's number. Sometimes blocked numbers too. I never answered. Silence was my answer. But silence doesn't end a war. It only draws out the waiting. A week after that dinner, I opened the door to find Daniel again. Only this time he wasn't smiling, and he wasn't crying. He looked wrecked. His clothes were wrinkled, his face pale, eyes ringed in red. He stood there like a boy about to confess he'd broken a window. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside, wordless. He sat at the table where I'd once taught him to play poker, where we'd eaten birthday cake, where now the air carried only tension. He put his hands flat on the wood. His voice cracked. "She's not letting it go. Mom says you're hiding something, that there's more money, more property, that you're just trying to punish her." I kept my face still. "And what do you think?" He didn't answer right away. He rubbed his temples, breathed hard. Finally, he whispered, "I don't know what to think anymore." I poured his coffee. He wrapped his hands around the cup, though he barely sipped. His shoulders sagged, his voice softer now. I meant what I said last time. I didn't want to be part of this. She pushed me. I was scared of losing her. Scared of being nothing to her. I watched him carefully. Every word felt torn out of him. I wanted to believe. God help me, I did believe. I could see the boy flickering beneath the man. The boy who once thought I could fix everything. But I'd lived too long to confuse regret with repentance. Daniel, I said quietly, there's still a way forward. But it won't be easy. He looked up, desperate, searching. What do you mean? I didn't tell him the truth. Not then. I didn't tell him about the clause in the trust, the 5 years of clean living required before $1 could pass into their hands. He thought I'd locked him out completely. He thought there was no hope. And that was my final move, leaving him in the dark. Because sometimes the hardest lesson isn't losing. It's learning there's still a door open and realizing too late you never tried to walk through it. The next evening, my daughter called again. This time I answered. Her voice was sharp, already angry. Where are you? What have you done with the house? You think this is funny? I think, I said slowly. You forgot who raised you. There was a long silence on the line, then the kind of laugh that doesn't carry joy. You think you won, old man? You think some trust fund is going to stop me? I'll find a way. You already lost, I told her and hung up. My hand trembled a little after I set the phone down. Not from fear, but from the weight of saying what I should have said years ago. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. But dreams aren't mercy, they're mirrors. I dreamed of my wife, sitting across from me at the kitchen table, her hand reaching for mine. She didn't speak, just looked at me with that gaze that always said more than words could. And I woke with the question still burning. Had I done the right thing? Or had I only sharpened the knife between us all? 2 days later, Daniel came again. He didn't knock this time. He just stood on the porch, waiting. When I opened the door, he asked one question. Is it really over? I met his eyes. No, Daniel. Not until you make it over. He looked at me, confused, almost pleading. But I didn't explain. I let the silence stand. Because some lessons, a man has to find on his own. He left without another word. I watched him walk down the driveway, shoulders hunched, as if the world itself pressed on his back. And I thought, maybe one day he'll understand. Maybe. The truth is, I didn't hate him. I hated what my daughter had done to him, how she'd bent him into her shadow. But I also knew this. Being bent isn't the same as being broken. So I gave him nothing that night. Not money, not forgiveness, not the knowledge of the clause. Only silence. Because silence, in its own way, is a test. And by the end of the month, silence would prove to be the sharpest weapon of all. By the last week of March, the phone had gone quiet. No more 40 missed calls, no more late-night messages. At first, I thought maybe they'd given up. Maybe the silence meant surrender. But silence is never that simple. Silence is a fuse. You just don't know how long until the fire reaches the powder. It was a Thursday evening when the knock came. Not Daniel's usual tap, not my daughter's sharp rap. This was harder, heavier, deliberate. I opened the door to find both of them standing there. Daniel looked worn down, like he hadn't slept in days. My daughter, though, her eyes burned with something colder than anger. She pushed past me into the house. You think you're clever, she said. Selling the place. Hiding the money. Playing games. You forget. I know you. I know your tricks. I closed the door quietly behind them. No, I said, my voice steady. You knew the father you could manipulate. The grandfather who loved too easily. That man's gone. Daniel stayed near the door, shifting his weight, avoiding my eyes. She, on the other hand, circled the room, scanning every corner like she expected to find some hidden stash. Where is it? She snapped. There is no it, I answered. Everything's already where it belongs. She turned on Daniel then, her voice rising. You said he was slipping. You said he wouldn't notice. And now look. Daniel's jaw clenched. He muttered, I never wanted this, Mom. That was the crack. Small, but deep enough. For the first time, I saw her face falter. A flicker of surprise, maybe even fear, at losing the grip she thought was permanent. I stepped closer, my eyes locked on hers. You taught him to lie to me, to spy on me. You turned my own grandson against me for money. And now you stand here, demanding what isn't yours. She didn't blink. I'm your daughter. That house, those accounts, they should come to me. That's the way it works. No, I said firmly. The way it works is you earn trust before you inherit it. And you lost both. The room fell silent. You could hear the clock ticking on the wall, steady as a judge's gavel. Finally, Daniel spoke, voice low but clear. What did you do, Grandpa? What did you set up? I looked at him, not her. Enough to make sure neither of you can take what you haven't earned. You want a future? Prove you can live 5 years straight without a mess at your back. 5 years of clean living, Daniel. Only then will you see a dime. My daughter's face twisted. She hissed, You think that'll stop me? I'll fight you in court. I'll drag your name through the mud. I stepped even closer, my tone hard as stone. Go ahead. Every paper trail leads nowhere. Every door you knock on will be locked. And every time you try, it'll only remind Daniel how far you've fallen. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked at her son, waiting for him to back her. But he didn't. He just stared at the floor, shoulders slumped, a boy again in the shadow of a mother who'd taught him all the wrong lessons. For the first time that night, I felt pity for him. But pity is not the same as forgiveness. She stormed out first, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. Daniel lingered, finally lifting his eyes to mine. 5 years, he asked softly. 5 years, I confirmed. It's not punishment, Daniel. It's a chance. You want to prove you're better than this? Then prove it. Not to me. To yourself. He nodded once, slowly. Then he turned and left, following her into the night. I stood alone in the quiet house, listening to the silence settle again. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like peace. Not joy, not victory, just the knowledge that the board had been reset. But here's the truth. I don't know if Daniel will make it those 5 years. I don't know if he'll stand up to her, or if he'll crumble under the same weight that bent him before. What I do know is this. I gave him the chance I never gave her. And whether he uses it or wastes it, that will be his choice. At the end of the month, as I packed away the last of my things in this rented place, I found myself whispering to my wife's photograph again. We did our best, I told her. And maybe that's all any parent or grandparent can say. The picture didn't answer. But the silence felt different this time. Not heavy, not waiting, just steady. So here's where I leave you. I don't know what Daniel will become, and I don't know if the daughter I once loved is already lost. The story isn't finished. Maybe it never will be. The question isn't whether to repay betrayal. The question is whether you can still believe in redemption after it's cut you this deep. And I'll leave that for you to decide.